Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christelle. I'll be facilitating today's webinar. It's great to see so many familiar names from our last session. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have prepared an update of the issues covered last time, in addition to the more pressing issue of the omission of Sydney Port by some shipping carriers. Our aim in hosting this webinar is to provide you as much information as we can so we can work together to prepare and plan, minimising the impact on your business. Before we get to the nitty-gritty of the webinar today, I just need to run through a few housekeeping items with you. Firstly, please input all your questions on the chat box below. We will go through them during the Q&A. Secondly, take a few moments to complete the feedback survey after the webinar. Thirdly, a recording of this webinar will be distributed via broadcast to you by the end of this week. And lastly, if you have any questions at all after the webinar, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Now, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our very own Scott Walker, our National Transport Manager for Commercial. He has been in the wharf cottage industry for over 25 years, and he is a member of the Port Transport Logistics Task Force and the Empty Container Working Group. Let me just pass you on to Scott now. Scott, the stage is all yours.
Thanks, Christelle. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today, and those of you joining us again. With the situation being very fluid and dynamic, we thought it was best to offer you all an update. Please understand, however, that due to constant changes, we are doing our best to keep up. I'll be giving an update on industrial action, empty park situation, and some vessel emissions. Now the industrial actions. It is great to see some mainstream media jumping on this. I know Channel 7 has broadcast these issues in all news bulletins in the last 48 hours. ScoMo even jumped in and said the unions were holding Australia to ransom. DP World has had a ceasefire for now, with both the MUA and DP World releasing statements that negotiations were progressing well and hoping outcomes are imminent. A quote from DP COO Andrew Adam as follows: "The Maritime Union's decision to withdraw all industrial action at DP World Sydney has enabled productive negotiations at our Sydney terminal to resume. We anticipate being able to finalise an agreement at DP World Sydney in the coming week. We're encouraged with the progress we made this week in Sydney," unquote. We hope these negotiations are finalised quickly at DP World. Hutchison in Sydney is still affected by industrial action, however, are keeping up with volumes. Both DP and Hutchison are hoping to have caught up and be back on vessel schedule by week's end. Patricks, however, is an issue. As per this slide, you will see current ongoing work bans at Patricks sites nationally. While these are in place, Patricks will continue to fall behind, in particular in Sydney, and the impacts will also be felt nationally. This effectively has the port running at less than 60% of capacity. The next slide shows the current planned stoppages, including a 24-hour stoppage this week at Patricks Port Botany. This will compound the current disaster we are facing. Last night, all slots from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. were cancelled, and it would appear the same has occurred for tonight. The vessel berthing delays at Patricks will be out to 18 days by this week in Port Botany. I would suggest even worse if the 24-hour stoppages goes ahead. This highlights the impact nationally for Patrick terminals, with Melbourne and Brisbane now affected by significant delays. I've been advised directly by Patrick's management that even with a return to full capacity, it will take a couple of months to catch up. Patricks control around 50% of work in Sydney, which is further impacting this. The hope is that DP World will be able to take some subcontract vessels in the coming weeks when they're fully caught up. Late yesterday afternoon, it was good news. We were advised that Patricks has lodged a claim in the Fair Work Commission seeking to end the MUA industrial action, which is occurring at Patricks Sydney. Just a quick summary of some of the claims for the new enterprise agreement and current pay conditions. A 6% wage increase per annum for 4 years. I don't know about you, but a 6% wage increase when unemployment is so high and the rest of Australian employers are faced with long wage freezes. They also want to guarantee that there'll be no job losses for the term of the agreement, and also each employee to receive a $2,000 sign-on bonus for the new enterprise agreement. Patricks have advised if they agree to the terms, it will cost their business $40 million per year. Don't know anyone who could cop that during a pandemic. On to empty container challenges. Empty containers remain a challenge, with data now pointing to an imbalance of 36,000 containers and 50,000 TEU in the Sydney supply chain. Both DP and Hutchison have advised me that larger than normal exchanges are occurring for the current vessels they are handling. This is up by around 1,000 moves per ship. This includes increased imports off and more empties going on, which is good news for us all. Due to the improvements at DP World, It is expected that 2x-sweeper vessels will be able to berth in the next 2 weeks. Both will remove 2,000 to 3,000 TEU of empties each. Our transport team is still faced with daily rejections at empty container parks and more than 130 redirections in the system to manage. Vessel emissions. I would first like to confirm with regards to this that many vessels are still arriving daily into Port Botany. I've seen some panic statements lately suggesting all vessels were being diverted. This is just not the case. Visa Transport Sydney is still delivering 180 to 200 containers every 24 hours, which is above average volume for this time of year. This is the current list of emissions from Sydney Port that we know of. The shipping lines are currently offering the following for cargo owners where cargo is discharged in Melbourne or Brisbane. Cargo will be transshipped from Melbourne or Brisbane at the shipping line cost. However, expected delays for cargo is between 2 to 4 weeks. Cargo can be discharged in Melbourne or Brisbane for urgent goods. However, responsibility of transport costs from alternate discharge port back to Sydney is with the cargo owner. I note we are now allowed to de-hire containers in Sydney where we transport from another state, which is good news. This slide shows some examples of notifications received from the shipping lines re the emissions. I would also like to make note here that CMA CGM would appear to have been hit by a cyber attack, similar to that of Toll and Maersk in recent times. We do not know what the impacts this will have locally or overseas. However, we wish them a speedy recovery to their systems. Now, visa options. Visa can road transport overnight from alternate states of discharge. This is the quickest option. We are currently handling goods as we speak between Melbourne and Sydney. There's also the option of rail from an alternate port discharge. This can take up to a couple of days and it's all dependent on the rail bookings. Please note at this stage, the bookings for rail out of Melbourne are out to 6 days fully booked. There's also the option to unpack and redeliver back to our warehouses. And instead of necessarily just transferring all those goods back into your own Sydney DC, we have the ability to be able to deliver to the end customer and distribute on your behalf. All options can be offered for quickest possible turnaround. That's all from me today. That's the update. We'll now move on to some questions we have received.
Thanks, Scott. We also do want to say thank you to those who completed the feedback survey from the last webinar. We have taken the feedback on board and we have designated a longer time frame for the Q&A. So if you have any questions at all about the information that Scott has covered just now, please input your questions on the Q&A box below. Otherwise, for now, we'll just cover the questions that we did receive during the registration stage. We have quite a few to go through. So the first question is from Adam. He says, I have heard a rumour that shipping lines are discussing not taking any new bookings for 3 weeks to let congestion clear. Is this true?
Yes, Adam, unfortunately that is correct. Our understanding is Maersk has stopped taking bookings for now. Look, we have not heard of any others at this stage. The situation is evolving daily. We're not a big user of Maersk ourselves, but we will, like I said, that things are changing quite regularly.
We've received questions from separate people and they kind of asked the same thing, so I've just joined them up. So we've got a question from Jenny and Terry. Given that some shipping lines are omitting Sydney, which is the best port to use in terms of congestion and cost, and how best can we work around the Sydney port delays?
Look, that's a tough question. That's a bit of a crystal ball moment. So I think you want to still try and send your cargo to Sydney where the shipping lines will allow that. A lot of the times their emissions may only be decided a week out, so you don't know whether the cargo is actually going to make it to Sydney. I guess if the choice is there, Melbourne is probably quicker and cheaper by road. However, Brisbane is cheaper and we feel there's a little bit more capacity on the rail, so it's cheaper by rail from Brisbane to Sydney, however cheaper on road from Melbourne to Sydney, and there are some delays on the rail lines out of Melbourne. But yeah, I'd still be trying to push Sydney. Let's hope the commission wins out and we start some normality.
Do you have any idea of the delays via rail at all at the moment? Out
of Melbourne is around 6 days. So if I tried to make a booking today for a container out of Melbourne, yeah, I won't get a booking till today's Tuesday, probably, Sunday or Monday.
We've got a question from Mick and Kate. Why is this not being reported in the media? What interventions are needed and by who to remedy the situation? And what actions are the government taking to maintain continuity of supply of essential products in Australia?
Well, thankfully, I think it is getting a lot of media attention. I know 2GB, Ben Fordham are all over it. As I mentioned at the start, Channel 7, Sunrise News and nightly news bulletins for the last 48 hours have had that covered. It is starting to gain the attention that it needs. It is costing this economy big dollars. So it's good to see that finally the media have jumped onto it. The interventions are a difficult one. I guess the Commission's involved now. And that then also moves into the question about government, and the government will be taking action with the Commission. There's rules within industrial relations laws and the Commission where if the damage to the economy is great or damage to our health. Now, the fact that they're talking about medicinal products, drugs for cancer, drugs for diabetes that are now being caught up with this. There's two precedences in the IR Commission to stop this. So I'd suggest both will be used, both the damage to our economy and the issue of our own health if these medicines don't arrive.
Emmeline and Sophie are asking, what is the likelihood of containers arriving in Sydney Port in October be redirected elsewhere, and what is the lead time for cargo now?
Okay, so again, it is a hard one to answer. I think, looking at the vessel emissions, whilst it's been very difficult for all of us, still is a small volume of containers or vessels that are being emitted. If I look at every day, I look at the vessel schedules, and there's still 2, sometimes 3 vessels arriving every day, yet over a 2 or 3 week period, we've had 10 emissions. So whilst it's a lot of cargo and it hasn't been fun for anyone, it's a small-ish percentage. So I would like to think that, again, so much rests on the Commission and Patrick's running at better capacity to be able to get that freight arriving. The timeline of that, I'm not 100% sure, so I'm sorry.
We've got a question from Zoran. He's asking, how will the current congestion on Sydney Port affect those containers that require fumigation treatment due to BMSB season? So he's saying that the containers are arriving in Sydney in the next 4 to 6 weeks. How will they be impacted and how much delay can we expect?
Look, again, it's a hard one. A lot depends on the empty, so I might cover off on the local fumos. We did cover this off a little bit in our last webinar. So the big delays caused from this, we require a lot of space to handle fumos and heat treatments while empties are in our yard filling up, can cause us a lot of issue and cause delay. So we're trying to avoid that situation. We want to be able to maximise the full capacity of our fumigation pads and our heat treatment facilities, which we've got 2 in Sydney. But we're also now working with DAWR to understand the process. If containers are discharged at an alternate state, can we, for instance, move cargo destined for Sydney to Sydney before fumo? Or will we need to leave and have all that cargo fumigated in Melbourne or Brisbane at our own facilities? Because obviously that would then again raise congestion concerns of having enough ability to fumigate containers quickly. So I'm sure if all the cargo comes off in Melbourne and we've got to fumigate everything in Melbourne, that could pose us an issue that we're actually already working with DAWR on a solution to be able to bring them to Sydney and then have that cargo fumigated or heat treated in Sydney.
Sarah has a question. Will we still be charged a port congestion fee or the empty yard fees for Sydney if containers are being unloaded interstate? Which is a great question.
It is, and it's Sarah again hitting me with a hard question. Look, the empty, yes, if it's brought to Sydney, it still falls. If we're dehiring it in Sydney, there will be the empty surcharge. If you unpack it in Melbourne or have it delivered to another of your facilities in Melbourne or Brisbane and we dehire it in that port, there won't be the empty surcharge. The congestion surcharge, this has been a pretty hot topic of discussion in the last 24 hours. Me personally, I don't believe you should be charged if discharged in Melbourne or Brisbane. The reality, however, is these fees in most cases are prepaid or form part of the freight. So I'd say these charges in most cases would apply. Look, and we are still working on the exact answer to that, but unfortunately, where it's placed right now, we believe they quite likely will still apply.
A question from Anthony. Why haven't Patricks and Hutchison stopped MUA actions through the court, even if temporarily, the way that DP World has?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Look, I'm surprised also that Patricks took more than a week after DP had a win at the Commission. I can only suggest they were hoping to resolve without the Commission, and that failed for them. With industrial relations, you've got to complete certain steps, certain negotiations and tasks before you can, go to the Commission. So my only assumption to that is that's what's had to occur before they could actually take it to the Commission, and they've been working to do that over the last week. It's certainly dire. And it is what's required ASAP. So I hope some news on that Commission is imminent, because it's well needed.
We have a question from Anonymous. How are other ports being impacted by what's happening in Sydney Port?
Look, there is an on effect there. I think in the earlier slide we showed that was based on Patrick's ports at the moment. There's certainly some delays going on at the other sites due to industrial action. And also with the DP industrial action, I'm not 100% across what each of the other DP terminals in Australia are up to with their negotiations. The DP industrial action has only been sorted or taken to the Commission for the Sydney port. So is Melbourne and Brisbane port still affected under a DP banner? I'm not 100% sure and at what level, but Patrick certainly is. And we can see, I think the Melbourne delays are out to about 9 days, and I think it was 4 days in Patrick's. Again, with also the volume being pushed, whilst it's only a percentage, that sort of percentage increase, when you add it directly into a supply chain without notice, does have an impact. So that's obviously affecting them as well.
We've got a question from Natasha. You briefly covered in this earlier today. Are medicinal products exempt from the industrial action? She heard it on the news recently.
I think I actually know who Natasha is asking that question. And Natasha, good news. Your goods, I think, are going to be leaving Melbourne soon. Look, nothing is exempt where we cannot access containers through delays. In this sort of crisis, it's all about accessing and what we can and when. Getting ships in and service is the most important thing now. I have heard the media reports which mention this. The difficulty is actioning it. Every ship would have some form of medical goods on board. When so many are delayed, how do you prioritise?
Question from Steve. Can OneTrack still provide real-time tracking of shipments through its interface with OneStop and Ocean Insights?
Yes, 100%. OneStop and Ocean Insights are still updating OneTrack. It's obviously been a very difficult couple of weeks because we're getting so many changes in data. So due to the significant volumes of updates, we have had to make some improvements to OneTrack to increase the speed of these updates. I'll also say as well, OneTrack is only as good as the information it receives from these systems, because it's quite chaotic. So if one-stop systems aren't updating quick enough from shipping line or port information or Ocean Insights, then we're only as good as the information we're being fed. So there's a couple of difficulties there. Also, probably a little bit concerning is the issues with CMA CGM. We're going to potentially lose some of that visibility if they've got an outage. So we really do hope that it's a very quick fix for them and it doesn't have a further impact on any of us.
We've received a question from Sarah. So we finished all the questions from the registration stage. So we're just going to go through the live Q&A now. Sarah is asking, will the container detention dates be extended by the shipping lines to allow for the extra time for to move boxes from interstate? Yeah,
we need to deal with that on a case-by-case basis. I know Maersk actually was one of the only, or that I'm aware of, is the only shipping lines that announced sort of a blanket additional couple of days detention. It is on a case-by-case basis, and I think it's best just to work with your customer service rep if that's what's going to occur, and we'll apply for those potential extensions. But yes, you would hope so.
Isabel is asking, how are exports being impacted by this whole situation?
Well, significantly actually. One, exports are hard at the best of times for the Australian economy. So there's a lot of talk around this cost impost on the exports. Now, we are an importing nation. Probably a lot of our customers are importers and they're affected by the large increase. But the exports going out is just as bad. And surprisingly, with the empty container crisis, I would have thought that more empties were available for our exporters. It's because the terminals are so congested, they can't actually prepare the empties for export. So it is causing a lot of problems. Believe it or not, we've actually had to run containers into another port this week to meet a vessel to export because we couldn't export from Sydney. It's having a massive effect across the board.
A question from Tanya. What is your best estimation for how long this congestion is likely to last? And do you have an estimate if this congestion will end by October?
Look, unfortunately, my honest answer is no, it won't be gone in October. Today's the 29th, so of September. I spoke directly with some people from Patricks, and they've said even if they go back to full capacity today, it'll take a couple of months to clear up. In saying that, I think we'll all see some quick improvements because you've just got to reduce the pressure in the pressure valve. And I think whilst it'll take a long time to catch up, I think we would all see and all feel a little bit more comfortable if we can run at capacity.
Lucille is asking, is it true that the union has given a written notification to Fair Work Commission that no further industrial action at Port Botany will be given before November?
I think you might be referring to DP World. So DP World, last Saturday week ago, the Commission, DP World and the MUA went to the Commission and they had a stay of proceedings till the 1st of November. What's occurred since then is both parties in the last 48 hours have released statements to say that some good negotiations have happened since that commission and they are expecting a resolution. That is only based on DP World Port Botany.
Theory is asking, what other steps is the federal government doing to bring the Maritime Union back to working without, I think, just to stop them from doing the interruptions that they are doing at the ports?
Yeah, look, I think I know that ScoMo's been out, he's said a few things today. The government is obviously pushing for these things. They would be pushing directly to the MUA and saying, hang on a second, this has gone too far. At what level and how and when they actually put the foot down, I'm not really sure. I would have thought, and the fact that this is so critical, Patrick's released the statement that they need to go to the Commission. That Commission hearing, and I'm not sure when it's due, but I would say that Commission hearing would be happening today at some time. So I am hoping for some information. I would say there will be some significant pressure from the federal government to assist in the Commission. But again, I'm not privy to all those negotiations.
Tanya is asking, currently are all containers being unloaded in Sydney being charged with a congestion surcharge?
No, not that I believe. The last week when we did our first webinar, it was initially reported it was based on ETA, but that reverted to ETD from port or from origin. So that would have started 2 weeks ago. So I guess with containers coming from China and Asia, they won't be far off being charged, but not all cargo, because it was based on ETD, or expected time of departure at origin, from middle of September or thereabouts. Every shipping line was a little bit different how they handled it.
A question from Ed. What daily road capacity of 40-foot containers can you move from Brisbane to Sydney?
I can actually handle a lot more from Melbourne. It is a longer distance from Brisbane, and because we don't have dual carriageways, the road hasn't been finished directly through. We don't have as good access to permits for high productivity vehicles, which we do between Sydney and Melbourne. I think in one of the earlier questions, I had a preference for road out of Melbourne. It is based on distance, but it's also based on the ability to carry a bit more on the road and do a bit more. In answering your question, look, it all comes down to when, where, how, what else is going on at the time. We have been able to throw significant resources to get over the next 24 to 36 hours, I'll road 8 40-foot containers from Melbourne. So we have been able to throw that sort of resource at it. It sort of is a case-by-case basis can look at, because we can utilise the fact that we've got the rolling assets in all 3 states. We've got very large transport facilities, so we can share the load amongst ourselves too. So depending what's happening in Sydney versus what's happening in Brisbane versus what's happening in Melbourne, we're all operating sometimes on different highs and lows as far as volume goes. We can all assist each other, and that's what we do, and kind of case by case basis. But if there's volume that needs to move, we can do it. And it's also something you'd probably, even if you had volume coming out of a particular port, you'd probably share it amongst, if you had some urgent containers, and I have an example that we're doing that right now out of Melbourne, where we're sharing some of the urgent containers are hitting the road, some slightly less urgent containers are hitting the rail, and then some even less urgent containers are staying on the boat to be transshipped, and we'll see them in a couple of weeks. So I think it's looking at the project that's required and then managing it with all parties and what they need.
Question from Terry: is there an issue with not having enough empty containers in China and India?
Yes, my understanding is there are equipment issues, at least China and Southeast Asia. I'm not 100% sure on India, but quite likely could be. There's certainly a lot in Sydney that I could share with them. But these delays in the vessel rotations, you don't have the ships going back as quick. So it is causing certainly some problems, and that's my understanding. But I think with China and Asia, it's also a little bit of a global issue as well, Sydney or Australia based.
We've got a question from Zior. Maersk is now imposing 350 USD per TEU from the 1st of October arrival, whilst others are imposing on ETD basis. Do you know if there's any chance that Maersk will change the charges from ETA to ETD?
I highly doubt it, because they've obviously been quite strategic in what they've done, because they haven't released that state. I believe that was only released shortly, not long ago. And I'd say they've kind of said they didn't release it from ETD middle of September. They've now gone with ETA 1st of October, which is certainly hard when you've got a lot of containers, I'm sure, on some ships coming from Europe that have, been sailing for 6 weeks.
Thanks, Scott. We do have 2 remaining questions left. So one from Tina, but it's quotation based, so we might actually take that offline. And so Tina will just get in touch with you with a quote for that. And also for Brandon, he's asking a little bit about why the congestion is happening in the first place. We will actually be sending across a video recording of this webinar and a copy of the presentation afterwards by the end of this week. So hopefully that will help. And if you have any further questions, just get in touch with us. I am very aware that I'm very conscious of time. It's past 2:30. So if there's any last questions, please lodge them on the Q&A now, or we might just finish up for this afternoon. Okay, we might just finish off there. Just wanted to say thank you so much again for
Isabel's
okay. Wait a second. Yeah, Isabel just posted something. Can we have the list of vessels emitting? Yes, so we did actually include that list on the presentation today. So once we distribute a copy of the webinar, we are also distributing a copy of the presentation as well. So you will have that definitely by tomorrow at the absolute latest.
And if you need that sooner, just contact your customer service representative at Visa and they can give that to you straight away.
Yes, definitely we can. Yeah, I think that's it for us, Scotty.
That's all.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure having you at the webinar. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with your VGL representative. Have a nice afternoon.
Thanks everyone.
Thank
See you
very
later.
much.